Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Darren Hartley. I'm Chief Executive at TAROE Trust. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I'm really pleased and delighted to be able to join today by Lorraine Gill and Lisa Birchall. Lisa is the author of a report that was recently produced by the National Federation of ALMOs on tenant voice. So a really interesting and topical, relevant theme for today's discussion. Yeah, I was really pleased when I saw the contents, and it's one of those publications that's filled with lots and lots of materials, good practice examples as well. So delighted that we're able to kind of showcase that in today's webinar series, the latest one that we're bringing to tenants and the sector more generally. So thank you very much for joining. Just a few housekeeping matters before we hand over firstly to Lisa and then Lorraine. We are recording today, so in the usual way, everybody hopefully is comfortable with that, and it enables us to kind of post the recordings onto our YouTube session, onto our YouTube channel, which will be available either later today or tomorrow. And again, in the usual fashion, we'll send around a message to everyone to let you know when that's being posted. So we've got about an hour to an hour and a quarter where we're going to be hearing about this publication. As usual, this is being hosted on Zoom webinar, so we've got the chat function. So I'd invite everybody as we go through to raise points, questions, and then I'm assured by Lisa and Lorraine that there'll be a chance then as we go through to kind of pause, discuss any questions, and equally, if I kind of like go over to you, I can, in the usual way, you can be brought in if you want to speak and to introduce those questions as well. So I think without further ado, I'm going to go into the background. I'll be monitoring the chat, so I'm here the whole time, but I'm going to give centre stage firstly to Lisa Birchall, National Federation of ALMOs. Thank you, Lisa, for joining us today, and over to you.
Brilliant. So I'm going to share my screen, which is always a little bit stressful at this point because it doesn't always do what I want it to do. But hopefully, if somebody can make a sign or...
That's it, Lisa, we can see it. And yeah, and it's all up in presentation mode. That's brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting us to come and talk to you today. So I'm Lisa Birchall. I'm Policy and Research Officer at the National Federation of ALMOs, and I'm joined by Lorraine Gill, who is a Stockport Homes tenant, Stockport Homes board member, and also chair of our tenant advisory panel, which I will come back to in a minute. So I'm going to provide some comments about our publication and a bit of the background, a few of the key learning points, and then hand over to Lorraine to talk about her many bits of experience from the various different roles that she has. I'm hoping not to take up a huge amount of time, so we have time for conversation and questions at the end. And as Darren said, I have turned off my chat function so I don't get distracted, but Darren can raise any points and comments with us as we go. That's fine. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background about who we are and what we do, because I'm sure for a number of you, ALMOs have been around for over 20 years now. This might be something that you're well aware of, but we have a kind of soup of acronyms, and I just wanted to start with a little bit of background. So the NFA, the National Federation of ALMOs, we're the membership body for 23 ALMOs across England, and those ALMOs manage around 300,000 local authority homes. ALMOs, arm's length management organisations, basically council housing management companies, 100% owned by their local authority. Tenancies are council tenancies. They were set up about 20 years ago to access decent homes funding, and there were some real core principles in how ALMOs were originally set up. So the idea being that there's an operational focus on day-to-day housing management, and you're splitting out the operational from the strategic, which remains with the local authority. They also had a clear focus on tenant involvement and listening to the tenant voice. So around a third of ALMO board members are tenants, a third councillors, and a third independents, and that's pretty much remained the same across the last 20 years. And ALMOs also have a focus on good housing services. That was a core principle of setting up ALMOs in the first place. So just a little bit of a background about us and who we are. We have a tenant advisory panel which we set up a couple of years ago, which Lorraine chairs for us. A tenant advisory panel, it's got around 20 involved tenants from across the sector who we bring together. We consult on NFA policy, the kind of positions, and we also have speakers coming along from various organisations to talk to our panel. So yeah, so that's a little bit of a background on us. I also wanted to very briefly talk about why we're looking at tenant voice now, and I am absolutely convinced that I'm preaching to the converted here, but I just a few points that I wanted to make. So the NFA published something on tenant engagement back in 2018, and it was between the Grenfell Tower fire and the social housing white paper, and obviously an awful lot has happened since then. In terms of we have the white paper, we have a housing ombudsman service which is much more beefed up. We have the move towards a proactive regulator and the regulation bill going through at the House of Lords at the moment, and introduction of tenant satisfaction measures and all of the work being done there. We also have a regulator and an ombudsman and a government that is actively naming and shaming underperforming landlords. And so in the period between the social housing white paper and now, it's been a really good and necessary opportunity for housing providers to make sure that their houses are in order, if you excuse the pun. We also have the Building Safety Act, which has requirements on resident engagement and complaints and other areas. The house with a scarf on it is social housing decarbonisation. It was my attempt to do that in an infographic, but that's really important, and that work is happening at the moment, and landlords are looking at how they're involving residents in decarbonisation work. So there's a huge amount going on, and we wanted to share what was happening in the ALMO sector. We wanted to widen the scope to look at culture, to look at customer services, and not just focus on kind of tenant engagement and involvement, but a much wider position. And there's just a couple of things I would say as well, is that of course ALMOs don't always get it right, and we as a sector, we are a learning sector, and I think it's really important that when things do go wrong, organisations are able to learn, they're able to improve, they have that relationship with tenants. And then the other thing I think is important to say is that our sector has welcomed social housing regulation changes. We're looking forward to regulation, and we just want it to come faster, really, because it will be really good for the wider social housing sector. So, in terms of the publications, I am going to talk to you about our Tenant Voice publication, but I also am slightly slipping under the wire another publication that we've done, because I'm hoping that it will be of use to you as well. So Tenant Voice is looking at culture, it's looking at customer service standards. It has the tenant perspective in it, from interviews and conversations we've had with tenant advisory panel members. But I also wanted to raise this other publication, which is, I put the link to it on our website, if you want to go and have a look at it. It's a plain English briefing. It provides a summary of kind of regulatory changes happening in the social housing sector. It also it also makes it clear what landlords need to be doing to prepare for regulation, to prepare for what changes to the Housing Ombudsman, or everything that's happening in that space. And it also has a checklist of questions that tenants can ask to help their ALMO respond to the social housing white paper. And it's not just ALMO specific. A lot of the questions are also applicable for local authority tenants, for housing association tenants. So, for example, within this we have questions on culture, how the resident voice shapes services, complaints handling, are residents assured their homes are safe. And it's sort of designed to be a bit of a can opener and support tenants that maybe aren't quite so close to the detail, or who are interested in understanding how they can support their landlord. So I wanted to flag that up, and as I said, very much under the radar, because I'm really focusing on the Tenant Voice publication, but I thought that might be useful to have a look at. So this publication comes from conversations that we've had with tenants, with our members, so with chief officers, tenant engagement officers, complaints handling officers, and it's designed to give a kind of wider view of some of the issues. I wanted to start by the summary of the tenant perspective. So these messages come from conversations we've had. As a membership body, we have a much closer relationship with the ALMO, obviously, but this is where we use our tenant advisory panel to try and get some of these messages through and hopefully share the tenant perspective. One of the areas which was a key kind of message that from our conversations is the importance of language, and not using acronyms, not using kind of really jargonistic language, and having just written a publication on decarbonisation where I had to Google every other acronym and every other word. I totally empathise, and the importance of making sure that you use plain English that's accessible, which is one of the reasons that we have a publication that's designed to be a lot more accessible, which was the one I just spoke about. Also making data and information accessible. So hopefully tenant satisfaction measures will do some of that. But making sure that information is presented in a way so that tenants can understand it and can analyse it. And that's that whole thing about data literacy and not presenting realms of data and numbers and expecting people to be able to understand what it's saying. Feedback loop. So tenants talk to us about the importance of the feedback loop and making sure that their comments, their feedback, their views are taken into consideration, but they're also told how they've been used to shape and improve services. And that's sort of linked to the trust element, the trust between a landlord and tenant and landlord. Lived experience. So tenants talk to us about the importance of social landlords recognising the lived experience of tenants and the importance of that in governance structures on boards and tenant scrutiny panels. So that was a clear message. Because I have everybody's faces along the right, let me just see if I can move you, put you down there. Okay, yes, so I can now see my next point. So training and entry points. So this was very much to do with tenant engagement structures and basically providing a range of entry points for tenants to come into an organisation, and also providing the training to develop skill sets. For example, some tenants might not want to start off on a board, but they might want to start off on a scrutiny panel and develop the confidence and skills to move to a board level. So that was really important, and linked to that is the point about investing long term and not flip-flopping between strategies and not kind of reintroducing the next big tenant engagement strategy, but developing a plan over time and sticking to it. Diversity of voices was really important, and making sure that you hear from from a range of different voices and have that diversity. Setting realistic expectations was another message that came back to us in our conversations. So making sure that it's clear on a tenant engagement level, what you are expecting from tenants and what is possible, but also just in general about sort of standards of service, and that again, it comes back to the trust between a landlord and a tenant. Don't ask for feedback on something you've already decided was a key message, particularly when we talked to tenants who are involved in scrutiny. And then, as I said, investing long term. So, Darren, I might stop there for a second and see if anybody has anything that they would share, kind of whether these sort of reflect people's experience and whether there's anything that we've missed in terms of kind of key principles.
Yeah, great. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me, Lisa.
Yes, I can.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Oh, it's all working fine.
I can't see you, and I can't see anything else.
So I think that's raised a number of topical issues, hasn't it? We've had some chat as we've been going through. So one of the questions which we've had raised is from John in Barnsley. Is raised the question, and I'm going to kind of add a little bit to it, if that's okay, because John's asked the question about how can you make sure that you're getting the genuine tenant voice and that's not diluted. And I guess one of the things where you've highlighted on your slide is about the diversity of voices as well, isn't it? Because there's going to be lots of differing views. So did you see anything in the research which kind of was a good example of where landlords were really sort of trying to kind of validate or check the kind of the views and perspectives that they were getting were kind of reflective of tenants more generally, perhaps?
Yes, I think there's quite a lot of that that comes through in the research. So particularly thinking about, so for example, in London, this ALMOs working with community groups, local charities to go to where people are and develop those relationships. So I think it's Lewisham Homes who works with a lot of young people and kind of supports with programs like getting young people into radio and developing those relationships and then kind of asking questions and making sure that their voices are heard as well. I think it's also about reviewing how you go about engagement, like recruitment, but also we know during COVID, ALMOs moved a lot online, which opened up the diversity because there were a lot more people who could access online things. And one of my points later on actually is how you maintain that. You don't lose the width and the breadth that you have there, whilst maintaining a kind of face-to-face presence and face-to-face options for people. I think when we talk to tenant engagement officers, there's a really strong focus on having a range of different methods for tenants to talk to the organisation, and not just having the same kind of, not just going about things in the same way, refreshing scrutiny panels, refreshing area panels and all these kind of things to make sure that you're constantly trying to reach people who may be less, I don't want to say, I hate the phrase harder to reach, but for the organisation, they may be harder for the organisation to hear from. So does that answer your question, Darren? Yeah,
I guess from the NFA's perspective as well, when you were preparing this report, this was not just about engaging with staff, was it? So you were directly engaged with tenants themselves, so you were hearing it, as it were, from the tenants' mouths.
Yes, yeah, and we're a very small organisation, so we don't have a huge number of resources. So we do rely. I mean, what I would love to have done is a kind of co-produced piece of work which is similar to the Northern Housing Consortium's work that they've done around the around decarbonisation and citizens' juries. So we do the best that we can to make sure that we hear from tenants and get their voices and share their feedback. Yes. So we talked. So I talked to tenants who are on our tenant advisory panel, and we gathered that feedback. Our tenant advisory panel is made up of a range of different people from across the country. So we have board members on it, we have scrutiny panel members, we've got sort of various different levels of involved tenants. So hopefully that captures that feedback. Yeah, so that's the intention.
Yeah, that sounds great. In fact, we've had a message from Brian which kind of follows that theme on a little bit as well. And I guess there's kind of two parts to this. At the NFA, your tenant panel, but then there's the kind of the tenant panels at landlords themselves.
Yeah.
So Brian said, do you think that the tenants' voice groups should be the ones who validate the information being provided by the landlords instead of just accepting the reports being provided? So I think you've answered some of that, haven't you, already, by going out and speaking to the tenants themselves. But what role did your own tenant panel perhaps play in this process as well?
So I just noticed Lorraine has her hand up, and so Lorraine's the chair of our tenant advisory panel. I didn't know if she wanted to say anything, or she might put her hand back down again. But so what we did is we held two meetings. Well, one meeting with our tenant advisory panel to gather their views, and we shared the publication with them so that they could comment on it, come back to us, and add to it if they wanted to. And then also I did interviews with tenant panel members individually as well, to gather some of the information. And in terms of, so we have one case study in the scrutiny section from South Tyneside Homes, and they, the scrutiny panel at South Tyneside Homes is entirely independent. It scrutinises information. It makes its decisions about what to scrutinise based on data, the draft tenant satisfaction measures, data that they've been gathering, and kind of that level of scrutiny of the organisation, which is independent, is really important. And the I think we rely on a lot of information from our members, but hopefully can cross-reference it against our TAP as well.
Can I just jump in there then, please, Darren, in response to?
I was just about to. Oh, you beat me to. I was just about to come to you, Lisa, to say. And
it's okay. It's just really to backtrack on when I was talking about the tenant advisory panel being a mixed group, and I think we're really fortunate enough to have tenants on that group. One, it's already been said that geographically it's across the UK, so we're getting this cross selection of input and perspectives. But also we're really fortunate because the tenants are engaged in other big groups such as the Ombudsman group, the building. You'll have to forgive me, I can't think of the name right now, Lisa, I don't know if you can jump in. But we know that the information that we're sharing collectively as well is one, those members in these other regulatory type forums are bringing it back to us and being captured, and also our collective thoughts and views are going back to them specific groups too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so in other words, it's part of a larger and broader network, isn't it? I think
Yes.
I think probably the additional groups you think of, the Health and Safety Executive have the interim residence group, which is, and then DLUC, the government department, also have their building safety, the residents building safety group, don't they? So there's the two of those that are kind of running alongside as well. Before we go on with the presentation, can I just ask another question, which is raised by Cyril? And I suspect it's probably not such an issue in the ALMO subsector relative to some of the others. We had last week, we had a webinar where we were talking about tenant satisfaction measures, and certainly one of the strong themes that come through from tenant satisfaction measures that are going to be required by the regulator was that the burden on some of the smaller organisations is going to be kind of disproportionate because of what they're going to have to do. But I guess for a lot of ALMOs, the very nature of ALMOs and the history and how they came into being is that you've kind of almost got a critical mass, haven't already. Yeah. So I'll vary that question slightly and say, did you notice any kind of differences in approach where size makes a difference, or is that not really relevant in the ALMO sector?
Possibly in terms of how many resources an organization has, and what they can do with the resources they have. But I don't, in terms of kind of where they're all starting from and the TSMs, I don't think so. I wouldn't say. I think they're all sharing kind of good practice about how to do it, but no, I not that I can pull out from our report. I wouldn't say. Yeah,
I mean, certainly my experience with the ALMO sector, they're all kind of a critical size, really, aren't they? By the very nature.
They're all, yes, they will all be doing full TSM kind of data collection and analysis. And actually, as I said, a number of them have already run draft TSM collection this year to understand how it will work. So we're already doing it. They already do the kind of staff survey and other things, and sort of looking at how to integrate them anyway.
Sure. I was just, so one final one. That before we carry on, and that I get, that was just in relation to kind of engagement with younger people. Was there anything that stood out from your research?
Yes, so that there was that example in London, so working with young people, and I think it's Lewisham Homes, but I'm happy to provide information afterwards. Working with young people, we also have a number of kind of initiatives where the ALMO works with community groups, kind of actively works with young people to get them interested and to get them involved. Lorraine, from Stockport Homes, is there anything that you would, in your experience, I was just trying to think. I mean, I might have to go away and have a think about any initiatives that we can signpost people to. But yeah, there is. I think also the online thing as well is really important. So having a lot more engagement digitally, I think, has really widened the number of people who want to be involved. Using things like Facebook and other like social media to share messages is also really important. Lorraine's put her hand up.
Hi, Lorraine.
Hiya. So yeah, just to support that as well, I think it's we shouldn't dismiss the fact that with the pandemic, that highlight and the focus on our youth as well, didn't it? You know, in terms of the hardship that some geographical areas are in, and initiatives also. And as a result of that, there were initiatives that were driven to make sure that we can reach out to those too. But in answer to your question, Lisa, in terms of Stockport Homes, very active in terms of, you know, we provide school holiday clubs during like school term in, you know, the community centres. They think I'd have to double check, but I think they've got offices that, you know, their roles are specifically in youth engagement and some form of supporting strategy, you know, actions that feed back into the corporate plan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily specific to the ALMO sector, but I've certainly seen examples where organisations have created kind of youth, like a shadow board, but a youth board to get involved with the governance, and definitely where you've got kind of engagement with broader pre-existing youth networks like youth groups and the kind of challenges of kind of like Duke of Edinburgh type challenges where landlords will get involved in those as well. It's a good way to kind of combine discussions with pre-existing and get engagement groups. I'm aware we've had quite a lot of discussion. You've got a lot more in your presentation to go through, Lisa. So we'll pause the questions for now, but we will come back. I know there's some hands up and things, but we'll come back to that in a moment. We'll need to kind of move on with the presentation.
Okay, sounds good. So I am going to briefly talk about some of the things that are within the publication, and I wanted to start with culture. And I wanted to present, which Lorraine has heard this before, but my broccoli model of culture, which I always slightly regret talking about, because in case people think I'm completely mad. But this was to get away from talking about, it runs through us like a stick of rock, or tenants at the heart. I wanted a kind of image that showed what I think a good organisation should be developing. And basically, broccoli, when you cut it into little pieces, all the small pieces of broccoli look the same as the large piece. And on an organizational point of view, when you look at all the parts of an organization, the bits of an organization, they should all represent the culture, the ethos, the values of the whole organization. Individual staff, processes, systems, everything should kind of represent the whole. So I sort of talk about organizations being more broccoli. And then get very, very strange looks. So I don't always do that. But there are some messages within our publication, the importance of setting culture from the top. And this is from boards, which is one of the reasons why having that tenant presence on boards and tenant focus on boards is really important. A genuine approach to putting tenants in the centre of decisions. And really thinking about how an organisation's decisions are going to affect tenants. Not over-promising and delivering, but delivering, which is one of the points from my previous slide. Good communication comes up frequently when we talk to people, and needing good communication to have a good relationship between landlords and tenants. Organisations should understand what's really going on. So this is thinking about things like, are you asking the right questions? Do you have a really good handle on what your services are like? Do you have the data? Do you have the systems in place? High quality staff. DLUC have just done a piece of work on professionalisation of staff. And I think it's really important and a kind of a key issue at the moment. But also tackling stigma and stigmatisation of tenants, and basically being an organisation with a culture where it's almost not possible to stigmatise tenants. So, for example, one ALMO was doing a piece of work looking at their policies and procedures to make sure that they weren't not deliberately, but that unconsciously stigmatizing tenants. For example, offering tenants appointments during the day, assuming that tenants don't work and they'll be at home, and those kind of stigmatizing bits within policies and procedures, and just really actively tackling that is very important. So that is the broccoli model of culture. I'm just going to carry on for a bit, but we can come back if anybody has any questions. Because I wanted just briefly to talk about customer service culture. And I'm using customer here. I know, so some ALMOs use customers, some use tenants, some use residents. I'm talking about here kind of the customer service culture that we all understand. We've all had relationships with organisations where we've had a better relationship or not. I'm currently fighting with Sky at the moment and going around in circles, and I can't talk to them by phone. They don't have a phone number. I have to go online. They frequently ask questions. None of those questions relate to what I want, and I just go around in circles and get more and more frustrated. So I think, but I also think it's important to say that it's recognising that tenants can't take their services elsewhere necessarily. So it's having the scrutiny, it's having the tenant involvement, it's having the regulation and the housing ombudsman in place to ensure kind of good customer services culture. Ensure a good customer service culture. So this includes setting service standards with tenants, monitoring them with tenants, effective use of technology, so thinking about what can be digitalized, but maintaining the ability to ring up an organization and get something sorted quickly. Managing data, so having trustworthy data across good systems, which isn't always a given in the social housing sector. Customer-focused staff. From the 1st of October, all landlords should have self-assessed against the Housing Ombudsman Complaints Handling Code. And if you have self-assessed against the Complaints Handling Code, then you should have a really robust kind of a process towards complaint handling. And also within the ALMO sector, ALMOs use external accreditations to kind of assess the quality of what they do. Thinking about Institute of Customer Services, ISOS accreditations, local authority audits, all these kind of external checks and balances. Darren, do you want me to stop there for a second or carry on?
No, I'm conscious of time. If you carry on, I'm sort of logging the questions, so hopefully we'll have time to come back to everybody. Okay. So this is my last bit before I hand over to Lorraine anyway. So I just wanted to raise some of the areas that the ALMOs are looking at. I imagine also housing associations, local authorities are also looking at these. So the social housing white paper's has given organisations a chance to take stock. And there are a number of areas. So complaints handling is really important, making sure that the kind of the back office functions work. So that the communication is right, the systems are right, in order to effectively manage complaints and kind of not push people from pillar to post. Also looking at damp and mould issues, disrepair, all of that kind of area, and making sure that they match the Housing Ombudsman's approach. Hearing from diverse groups, which we've already talked about. I think ALMOs are looking at how they hear from diverse groups, but they're also one of the things I come back to is blind spots, and it's the Donald Rumsfeld, the things that you know, the unknown unknowns and your known unknowns, that kind of thing. But you don't want to be blindsided by something because you didn't know that you didn't know it. So ALMOs are doing things like tenancy audits. They're going out, ringing tenants that they haven't, ringing households that they haven't heard from for a while to make sure that everything's okay. Making sure that their data is up to date and robust, and that they can use it to understand what's happening. But yeah, so that's really important. Balancing virtual digital with face-to-face, we've talked about a little bit. And I think that's just about making sure that you maintain the benefits of the virtual world without losing the benefits of the face-to-face world, and being out in estates and out in communities. Oh, sorry, hang on, accidentally pressed the button. And being out in estates and communities, and having that kind of more than one way for a tenant to talk to you. Board responsibility is a really important point. I think it's making sure that boards would be able to demonstrate to the regulator that they are listening to tenants, that they have a strategic responsibility for the tenant voice, and that they make decisions based on that are based on tenant views, so they're not working kind of on their own, as it were. Listening, acting, and feeding back. So I know I've had conversations with tenant engagement managers talking about, well, we certainly listen, we certainly act, but do we always feed back on what we've done with it, and how do we strengthen that, and how do we make that more effective? Data quality, using data to understand services. This, for example, looking at repairs data, repairs satisfaction, like a kind of real-time picture of what's going on, and using that to improve services. And then also preparing for tenant satisfaction measures. And as I said, that ALMOs have been kind of running mock tenant satisfaction measure exercises to get them ready for regulation next year. So I'm going to stop there, Darren, before I hand over to Lorraine.
if that makes sense, or we can do Lorraine and then come back.
Yeah, no, if we could just pick up just a couple of questions whilst they remain fresh. First one, because you mentioned about board and board responsibility and the kind of the link with tenants, was just from my perspective, is it a requirement that ALMO boards have tenants on the board? Because it tends to be the case that you often see a lot more prevalence of tenants on boards of ALMOs versus the kind of the wider regulated sector.
So as I understand it, it was originally a requirement to have the third split. I don't think it's an actual requirement now, but it's very much a cultural position. So when we do an annual survey, and I think it's something like 31% of tenant board, ALMO board members are tenants. Yeah. And I think it's in the cultural DNA of the ALMO sector.
We're definitely seeing a big shift more generally in the sector away from tenants being on boards. Yeah. Which kind of segues quite nicely into the kind of the theme which has been raised by a number of people about what I'd kind of umbrella term put within the idea of independence. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of almost filtered or unfiltered voices, the role of tenant groups, how much are they influencing decisions, and does that have to be kind of what level of control that they have? And that kind of links in with something which we've been highlighting for some time, really, and that is where there's a balance, or in many instances an imbalance of power between the landlord maybe controlling the agenda, controlling the issues, versus tenants groups raising the issues which are relevant to them. So for instance, Brian has asked the question about scrutiny is mentioned in your report as being a critical friend, but to what extent did you see scrutiny groups, for instance, setting the agenda, writing their reports, and versus it being staff that then take it and perhaps apply a filter, which is something which John had raised separately about the kind of the filtering of the messages. Do you find in the ALMO sector that what level of control would you say they have on some of the tenant groups?
So I think it's probably a mixed picture. So we've pulled out some best practice, and I think there's some ALMOs that are still working towards a kind of a better place. I wondered. I mean, I know Sandy's on the call, and I don't know whether she may not want to come in, obviously, but I know, having spoken to her about scrutiny, she has views on this. So maybe if she were willing to talk. I mean, the people I spoke to when I was writing the report were very clear that their scrutiny panel was an independent panel. They chose what they looked at. They decided the kind of program of scrutinies that they did. In one particular case, actually presented at the board, turned up at the board and presented the findings themselves, so it didn't go through a staff member. But yeah, I think it's the publication we wrote in 2017 had a really strong theme running through it about power and handing over power, organizations handing over power to tenants. I think there are some really good examples. I'm not sure it's entirely across the sector.
Yeah, that's really helpful insight, Lisa. Sandy, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've been given a lot of trust from our organisation. They really are allowing us to do many things that I've never seen throughout engagement in 3.5 decades. So it's been fantastic. On the scrutiny group, we don't have board members, for the simple reason is that a board member on the group could sway the group. It could interfere with the way the scrutiny goes. We also write our own reports. It doesn't go through staff. We do this ourselves. Then we get it to the point that we can say, right, that's the final report after we have meetings outside of staff meetings and things as well. So we are tenant led in all of those respects. And as you know, we're even doing small videos and that, which they're starting to put on their site, which is a huge relinquish of power, really, because they've never done that before. Most organisations never used to allow tenants to have any form of area of their organisation, which of course the website is. There was no sort of control of that, so it always has to be separate. If we tenants want to do it as a separate entity, in other words, where we make the videos and put them on it, and that's of course where YouTube comes in handy. So yeah,
Sandy, you're Colchester Borough Homes, aren't you?
Yes.
The ALMO
yes.
in Colchester. Yeah.
Yes. They have done an awful lot of work with us. We're doing the one thing that's come up through we're doing a repairs report at the moment. And the one thing talking about language is this: the complaints area is known as the tenant experience, which doesn't really say anything about complaints. In fact, the wording of that is, well, do you want to ring up and tell me about your holiday experience? It doesn't say complaints. So, you know, wording is very, very important. So yeah.
Thanks, Sandy. Always great to have you on and to have your insights. I noticed Lorraine's got her hand up, and we need to go over to Lorraine anyway. So maybe if we pass over to Lorraine, and then you can do your stint as well.
Of course. To be honest, I've only got 2 slides in this, which yesterday I was quite happy to hide behind as part of the preparation, but I don't feel like we need them. I'd rather have see the room, if that's okay. Thank you. It's nice to, I feel like having a group discussion now. So my hand was up, let me just lower it. My hand was up just really off the back of what we're talking about in terms of a good example with that customer engagement. And I just wanted to share that with Stockport Homes, this is the first year that tenants have led the annual report. So from the start to the end of that process, they've chosen the theme, they've chosen what should be included in it, the approach to delivering it. The tenant and one of the tenants of the scrutiny came and presented it to us at board. So it wasn't that we have kind of dictated down. And we're really excited about that. Obviously it's not been published yet, but yeah, it was nice that as board members and all the staff, tenants have come to us to consult with us in sense of this is what we're proposing, have you got any thoughts, and that really, them thoughts are more on the digital stuff, you know, the audios, you know, we captured everything. So I just thought that was I just wanted to share that there are examples where, you know, there is a shift in that area. Do you want me to go straight into it then? Is everyone okay with that?
Good, Lorraine. It was interesting to hear about your annual report, as you were just saying, because I think there was a lot of sort of like general awareness about 10, 11, 12 years ago, wasn't there, about annual reports? Was even a good practice guide that was issued about what an annual report should look. I'd love to know an audit kind of more generally across the sector. How many organisations are still preparing the annual report for tenants, and what level of engagement tenants have in the preparation of those reports as well? Because I believe there was a requirement to publish that on everybody's website, and I've not seen very many of them recently, so it might be something that needs revisiting. But okay, so yeah, over to you, Lorraine.
You. Lisa, sorry, did you just want to jump in quickly there?
No.
Off the back of that. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you anyway, and thanks, Lisa, for sharing and updating us on that information. That was really helpful from the ALMO perspective, and I want to thank as well for the opportunity to join today. I'm going to start by offering some context about how I got involved as a tenant, and I want to apologise for those people that know me already. They know I can see Sandy smiling. I am a firm believer that we all have a backstory, and that backstory fuels our engagement as tenants within the sector. So my backstory is that I've always lived in social housing, growing up with my mum and 4 older siblings in a Stockport council property. Fast forward a few years and I became a Stockport council tenant myself, and back then the council provided the keys and they did my repairs, and that's how I recall the relationship was, and that was over 20 years ago, which I'm showing my age. Anyway, suddenly things started to change and there was a transition and there was moving. Stockport Council were moving into this ALMO arrangement, and all of a sudden there was consultations, and then I could pick the colour of my bathroom tiles, which is all very exciting. And then something started to shift in my views of what landlord and services was all about. In my very young, obviously, days. So then moving on, my circumstances changed, and the tenancy management officers and the services that were available to me from my landlord at that time really helped me and helped steer my direction around that time, you know, at the time that I needed assistance, and it had a profound effect. And that positive influence really changed my understanding of social housing in general. And I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to make a difference. And so I started to explore roles within the social housing sector myself. Now that was 13 years ago, and I've worked for a housing association, the same one in South Manchester now, for the last 13 years. I started off as a customer service advisor in the contact centre, worked on reception, I've managed teams in the contact centre, I've had experience as an enabled officer. And then in more recent years, my role has moved. So that's all operational stuff. And then in more recent years, I've moved into the essential services role as a business transformation officer and project management. And now I can take all that learning and I'm supporting services, reviewing their processes, the procedures, looking at how we can make it better, more efficient, using data to help make informed decisions, both qualitative and quantitative data, and really putting the customer at the heart of that in a form of like customer mapping and journey. So yeah, I've got lots of notes. I don't want to miss anything. So that's the backstory. And then before the pandemic, I probably reached a point in my life that I think I had a moment of reflection, that I realised that I could take this experience and this knowledge and use it to give something back. And being a proud Stopfordian, I applied for a role on the board of Stockport Homes. Now, for those that are not familiar with Stockport Homes, it's a really ambitious and complex ALMO group structure. We manage over approximately 11,000 properties on behalf of the Stockport Council. We've also got obviously a commercial side as well armed to that. Within that group structure, we also have a construction company, a development company, and a charitable function, which I think is obviously close to my heart because it is about transforming lives of our local residents and the community. So applied for that, and then opportunities arose, obviously, with the chair of the TAP panel at National Federation of ALMOs, and then recently I've been appointed chair of the Stockport Homes Customer Focus Committee, which actually we're talking about the influence of customer and the customer voice. To have customers on their board anyway, you know, culturally, it's, you know, you mentioned before, Lisa, but now having a customer chair, the customer focus committee, which really emphasises, you know, the customers, I think is a real step in the right direction, and I'm proud to be part of that. So really, I suppose off the back of that, I personally think it's really rewarding knowing that collectively the tenants are engaging to help shape services. I feel very lucky that my experience is within high performing organisations, but ultimately I do think there is a shift now in terms of a movement. And I know it feels like sometimes with just one voice, we're not, we won't get anywhere, we can't get anywhere. It really does have to be collective. And we know that obviously the white paper, the Building Safety Act, these are all steps that are being taken and to underpin the consistency across the UK, because where I'm fortunate enough to work in high performing organisations, I know that isn't the case everywhere, and I'm glad that I'm part of it on a national level as well. So that's my back. So I'm going to stop, because my next piece was really thinking about what could I share with you that, we're probably all doing and putting into practice. But before I do, which is only a few more minutes, I don't know if anyone's got any questions at this stage. John, hello.
Hello, Gilly. Thank you. Listening to your presentation, one of the things that came across is that TMOs, using your language, and housing management officers, which seems to be an updated version of the old tenant management officers, they've had an important role in your engagement and offering you options and training via your organisation. And I'm delighted that that is starting to happen now. It must be difficult for you as a resident to play a role in the management side. But the one thing that you do bring into the organisation is your experience of the customer side, because I know that there is a conversation going on between customers, tenants, and residents. So whatever the language is, I'm just so delighted to hear of an organisation that is being forward-thinking and getting residents that have the skills and ability, or better still, giving residents the skills and ability to perform in a managerial role and help organisation to change the whole ethos and embed engagement, true engagement, throughout their organisation. So well done to you personally, and well done to Stockport Homes. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thank you for the feedback, John. My core role, and I'm not sure if this has been made clear, sorry, if it hasn't, my actual core role, day role as the business transformation officer is a housing association in South Manchester called Southway Housing Trust. So it's not management. However, I've got to say, supporting with what you're saying, one of the things that Stockport Homes has offered to me as a tenant is the opportunity to have training and development, and they really support that and push that, even down to if I felt I needed a mentor or a coach, they've already assigned me a link officer. So the empowerment, I suppose, is what we're talking about, is is being offered in Stockport Homes as well, and to have the skills in the right place to support me. And one of our core values and statements at Stockport Homes is about transforming lives, and that is exactly what they are. For me, it feels very personable. I'm a tenant, and they are transforming my life by giving me the opportunity, and I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have that opportunity. So thank you.
The main driver of that is you yourself, Gilly. Well done.
Thank you, John. Sandy.
Yeah, what you say about training is the key to most things to do with most organisations, and tenants really need more training in how to be tenant led. They've had decades of being led, fed and told what to do, but now they're at the point where they're being told you've got to be tenant led, but they've never had to do it before. I think a lot of people, if they've ever worked for themselves in any way, shape or form through their lives, understand how to do that, or how to be more proactively up front and not worry about. I mean, you learn how to park your tenancy to one side. It's parked while you're doing stuff. So I just think there needs to be far more training that tenants can get as to how to lead themselves within groups. I think you've done an
absolutely
amazing
agree.
job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Oh no, it's certainly brilliant to hear the transformational effect that it's had both on your life personally and what it can have more generally on other people's lives as well. It's brought to mind one of the examples I'm aware of, which is, again, it's outside ALMO sector, but it's within the kind of the mutual sector, is some of the work that Phoenix are doing down in London, where they've got a tenant training academy to really assist with that kind of thing that Sandy was just talking about. Okay, I'll hand back over to you, Lorraine.
Thank you.
So that,
Are we okay for time?
yeah,
We've
we're
got a
okay.
few minutes, haven't we?
Another we've got sort of 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So to be honest, this information that when I'm thinking about what could I share today, I've already said that it's something that I'm sure we hear in, you know, the conferences we go to, any webinars, but these were just some of my thoughts. So in terms from a board level, I suppose and this is all very simplified, but because I know there's lots of areas that we could cover and get really specialist in. But from a board perspective, you know, boards to continue to challenge and seek assurance on organisational performance, as well as understand what's going on locally and in the wider sector. And I've already touched on the fact there's many ways to be doing that. You know, boards, we talked about, you know, skills and making sure we've got the right skills in the right place. There's lots of forums out there and, you know, publications that we can get that from. For board members to be constantly questioning, you know, how does this impact our tenants? We've made some small changes at Stockport Homes, which is really helpful for us as board members. And that is simply on the front page of our reports on the cover sheet, which we've always had. But now there is a section within that tells us how customers have been consulted on that, on this report, or on the work within that document. It also informs us if there are any equality, diversity and inclusion implications. And also we've started to highlight on the report where the work that's being done or the report supports regulatory compliance as well. So for example, we've recently reviewed the customer voice and influence strategy and action plan, and we know through the report of this front cover that because it's highlighted that the outcomes demonstrate how we are meeting regulatory expectations against the consumer standards, the ombudsman complaints handling, and so on and so forth, because it provides us with a list. And you know, just very simple things like that make a real difference in that snapshot moment. So that's some thoughts on the board side. Operational, like customer and committee, just really, again, just ensuring emphasis is on customers, seeking assurance, capturing participation and perspective, which I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it goes back to that broccoli model, doesn't it? That every element should be repetitive so that it all feeds into it. And I think Lisa's already touched on this, but educating to interpret data, and it probably touches on what Sandy said as well, you know, educating tenants to interpret data, although they really shouldn't have to, because if it's provided in a way that means something, it should really, you know, be self-explanatory. But that data, it's not just about numbers and graphs. You want to know and understand, well, what's the impact on customers, what's it telling us? And lastly, in terms of organisations, in terms of the organisation, it's being accessible to our customers and utilising savvy ways to engage staff and tenants. We know that since the pandemic, social housing is really advanced digitally. Make good use of that. And I'm a firm believer as well that officers and staff know and because they're so close to tenants and they're hearing daily and they've built up the relationships, bring them back in, use them to review your processes as well and your procedures. And to be honest, by doing that you are more likely to find that officers will apply change. Nobody likes change, but if they're part of it, they'll buy into it, and ultimately that will be a more efficient and better outcome for everyone. And then lastly, I just wanted to give an example in my core role. We're currently reviewing the damp and mold process, and we know that's very, a big thing at the moment, very relatable. And just an example where we consult with tenants, we're consulting with our scrutiny panel as well, and we are confident by consulting with our tenants on that particular process. It also supports the Housing Ombudsman report because they're helping us shape what good looks like and how it will impact them as well. And that's it really. I think that's we'll leave it there for me. And I know we've been quite fortunate because we've been talking throughout. I'm not sure how you are for time, Darren, but otherwise we'd be really interested to hear the group's views and of good examples or challenges that we can take from today as well.
Perfect, Lorraine. You've made me redundant. So if we've got just a couple of minutes, any last sort of final questions or comments? You've been very comprehensive today, so you've probably covered most of those things off. Sorry, I was just seeing what John's saying. Yeah, so just some of the hazards, I guess, that John's highlighting, that just because you've got various groups or panels in place, it doesn't mean that they're effective. It doesn't mean that they're always engaged with a broader range of tenants. So yeah, definitely some lessons to be learned there as well. Okay, well, if no other questions that I can see coming in, yeah, I can. Yep, great. Cyril's pleased, so I'm glad we could make you happy, Cyril. Thank you. It just remains to be said. Thank you, Lisa and Lorraine, both of you, for fascinating, informative, and really enjoyable session. It was great to have you on board today, and thank you for giving your time so that others can benefit from that.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Brilliant. Next up, just to say, there were a couple of reports which Lisa quoted in the presentation itself. I know Lisa also mentioned a 2017 report which was about power and power balance and relations. So if that report is available, it would be great if you were able to share it, so that what we'll do is we'll send a copy of the slides, a copy of the reports the two reports which you included in your presentation, and also if that was available, we'll tag that on too. We'll also give some details of the YouTube location where this recording can be accessed afterwards as well for others who weren't able to join us today. In terms of other kind of issues, which I usually use this section to kind of give a brief update. Today was the deadline for the rent consultation rent cap. If you go onto our website and social media, we've submitted our own response to that. But a reminder, in case anybody else was doing something in that field also. We're going to have a break next week from our webinars, but the next one will be in 2 weeks. So on the 26th of October, we're going to be welcoming back two academics that produced a report on social housing stigma in England, and the findings and recommendations from the follow-up report to that. We'll also have somebody from the Stop Social Housing campaign, which is the formerly known as Benefit to Society campaigns, who will be joining us for that. Details for joining that will be issued about a week in advance of the meeting as well. So if anybody's not highlighted that they want to join, please get in touch, and we'll make sure that you're on the list as well. Otherwise, big thank you once again to Lisa and Lorraine, and look forward to seeing you on our next session. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye for
Goodbye,
now.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Right.